Sarah wiped the sweat from her forehead as she examined the cracked concrete wall of the shooting range. The morning sun beat down on the outdoor facility, and she could already feel the heat building up for what promised to be another scorching day in Arizona. She had been working as a maintenance contractor for the military training facility for 3 years now. But this particular repair job was proving more challenging than usual. The wall had taken a beating from years of rifle practice. Chunks of concrete had broken away, creating dangerous gaps that could ricochet bullets in unpredictable directions. Sarah knew this wasn't just about aesthetics. Lives depended on her getting this repair right. She had seen what happened when safety protocols failed, and she wasn't about to let that happen on her watch. She knelt down beside her toolbox, pulling out her measuring tape and marking the areas that needed the most attention. The damaged section stretched about 15 feet across and rose nearly 8 feet high. It would take her most of the day to properly patch and reinforce the wall, but she had done similar jobs before. What she didn't expect was the group of Navy SEALs who would arrive that morning for their scheduled training session. Sarah had heard about these elite soldiers but had never seen them in action. She knew they trained at the facility regularly, but her repair work usually kept her in different sections of the base. Today was different. Today, she was working right in the middle of their primary training area. The first sign of their arrival was the rumble of military vehicles approaching the range. Sarah looked up from her work to see 3 black SUVs pulling up to the parking area. Men in military fatigues began stepping out, their movements precise and coordinated. Even from a distance, she could sense the intensity that surrounded them. One of the SEALs, a tall man with weathered features and piercing blue eyes, approached her work area. His name tag read Rodriguez, and his bearing suggested he was in charge of the group. Sarah continued working, trying not to let their presence distract her from the task at hand. "Ma'am," Rodriguez called out as he walked closer, "how long do you think you'll need to finish up here?" Sarah stood up, dusting off her work clothes. "I'm looking at about 6 hours, maybe 7 if I run into complications. I know you have training scheduled, but this wall is a safety hazard. I can't leave it half finished." Rodriguez nodded, understanding the situation immediately. Safety was paramount in their line of work, and he respected anyone who took that responsibility seriously. "We can work around you for now, but we'll need to use this range for live fire exercises this afternoon." "I'll do my best to stay out of your way," Sarah replied, already calculating how she could adjust her work schedule to accommodate their needs. As the morning progressed, Sarah found herself fascinated by the SEALs' training routine. They moved with a level of precision and coordination she had never witnessed before. Every action seemed calculated, every movement purposeful. They communicated with hand signals and brief, efficient commands that spoke to years of training and battlefield experience. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her painstaking work on the wall. She mixed concrete, applied patches, and carefully smoothed each section to ensure it would hold up under the stress of repeated gunfire. The work was physically demanding, requiring her to crouch, stretch, and maneuver in uncomfortable positions for hours at a time. Around midday, as Sarah was applying a particularly challenging patch near the top of the wall, she noticed Rodriguez watching her work. She had climbed onto a ladder to reach the damaged area, and her movements were careful and deliberate. She could feel his eyes on her, but she tried to focus on her task. "You're pretty skilled at that," Rodriguez commented when she climbed down to move her ladder to the next section. 3 years of practice, Sarah replied with a modest smile. "Plus a background in construction before I started working on military contracts. Not many people pay attention to detail the way you do," he observed. "Most contractors want to get in and out as fast as possible." Sarah paused in her work, meeting his gaze directly. "When people's lives depend on your work being done right, fast isn't always better." Rodriguez smiled at her response, recognizing the mindset of someone who understood the weight of responsibility. "I can respect that philosophy." As the afternoon approached, Sarah realized she was running behind schedule. The concrete patches needed time to cure properly, and she couldn't rush the process without compromising the integrity of the repair. She knew the SEALs needed to use the range, but she also knew she couldn't hand over a partially completed safety repair. The tension in the air was palpable as Rodriguez gathered his team for a brief meeting. Sarah could see them discussing their options, occasionally glancing in her direction. She felt the pressure of their schedule weighing on her, but she refused to compromise on safety standards. "We have a problem," Rodriguez announced as he approached Sarah again. "Our training window is limited, and we need to complete our exercises today. But I also understand that you can't leave this repair unfinished." Sarah nodded, appreciating his direct approach. "I need at least 3 more hours to complete the work properly. The concrete needs time to set, and I still have to apply the final protective coating." Rodriguez looked at the wall, then back at his team, then at Sarah. She could see him weighing options in his mind, calculating risks and benefits with the same precision he brought to military operations. "What if we found a way to make this work for both of us?" he asked, his voice taking on a tone that suggested he had an idea forming. Sarah raised an eyebrow, curious about what he might be thinking. She had worked with military personnel before, but never in a situation quite like this one. "I'm listening," she said, setting down her tools and giving him her full attention. Rodriguez glanced back at his team, who were watching the conversation with interest. Sarah could sense that whatever he was about to propose would be unconventional, but she was willing to hear him out. The afternoon sun continued to beat down on them as they stood there, 2 professionals from very different worlds, trying to find a solution that would work for everyone. Sarah had no idea that Rodriguez's next words would change not just her day, but potentially her entire perspective on courage, trust, and what it meant to be part of something larger than herself. She waited, her hands still dirty from the concrete work, her mind focused on the problem at hand, completely unaware that she was about to be presented with an opportunity that would test every assumption she had about her own capabilities and limitations. Rodriguez studied Sarah's face for a moment as if evaluating something beyond her technical skills. The other SEALs had gathered closer, sensing that their team leader was about to make an unconventional decision. Sarah felt the weight of their attention but maintained her composure, waiting to hear his proposal. "Here's what I'm thinking," Rodriguez began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making split-second decisions under pressure. "We need to run our exercises and you need to finish your work. What if we could do both simultaneously?" Sarah frowned, trying to understand how that would be possible. "I'm not sure I follow. This is a live fire range. I can't work on the wall while you're shooting." "Not exactly," Rodriguez replied, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "But what if you could be part of our exercise? What if your presence here became an element of our training scenario?" The other SEALs exchanged glances, and Sarah could see a mix of curiosity and skepticism in their expressions. This was clearly not a standard training protocol, but Rodriguez had a reputation for innovative thinking that had served them well in real-world situations. "I still don't understand," Sarah said honestly. "I'm a contractor, not military personnel. I don't have any training for whatever you're planning." Rodriguez nodded, acknowledging her concern. "That's exactly the point. In real-world situations, we often have to work around civilians who are just trying to do their jobs. Sometimes those civilians become part of the mission, whether they plan to or not." He gestured toward the damaged wall that Sarah had been working on. "This wall represents more than just a training facility. In combat zones, we encounter damaged infrastructure all the time. Sometimes we need to defend positions while repairs are being made. Sometimes civilians are caught in situations where they have to trust us completely." Sarah began to see where he was heading with this, but the implications made her nervous. "Are you asking me to be some kind of training prop?" "I'm asking you to be yourself," Rodriguez replied. "Continue your work, but do it while we run our exercises around you. It would give my team practice in protecting a civilian asset while maintaining operational effectiveness." One of the other SEALs, a stocky man with sergeant stripes, stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, this isn't standard protocol. We don't have authorization to involve civilians in live training exercises." Rodriguez held up a hand. "I'm not talking about putting her in danger, Sergeant Martinez. I'm talking about creating a realistic scenario where we have to account for a non-combatant in our operational space." Sarah felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of her was intrigued by the opportunity to see these elite soldiers work up close. Another part of her was concerned about the safety implications and her complete lack of military training. "What exactly would this involve?" she asked, her practical nature taking over. "And what are the risks?" Rodriguez appreciated her direct question. "You would continue your repair work exactly as planned. My team would set up defensive positions around the range and run various scenarios. Think of it as us providing security, while you complete a critical infrastructure repair in a hostile environment. Hostile environment? Sarah raised an eyebrow. Simulated, of course, Rodriguez clarified. We use blanks for most of our exercises, and when we do use live rounds, they would be directed downrange, well away from your work area. Martinez still looked uncomfortable with the proposal. Sir, what about insurance? Liability? Chain of command approval? I'll take full responsibility, Rodriguez stated firmly. This is within my authority as a training commander, and it's a legitimate training scenario. We've run similar exercises with embedded journalists and military contractors. Sarah considered the proposal carefully. She had always prided herself on being adaptable and professional, able to work under challenging conditions. The military contracts she had worked on before had exposed her to various unusual situations, but nothing quite like this. What would I need to do differently? She asked. Nothing, Rodriguez replied. Just do your job. Follow your normal procedures. The only difference is that you'll need to be aware of our hand signals in case we need you to take cover or move to a specific position. He gestured to Martinez, who stepped forward reluctantly. Sergeant Martinez here will give you a quick briefing on basic safety signals and procedures. 5 minutes of instruction that could save your life in a real emergency. Sarah found herself nodding slowly. The logic made sense even if the situation was unprecedented in her experience. And this would help your team how exactly? Real-world operations are never clean and simple, Rodriguez explained. We often have to protect engineers, medical personnel, contractors, and civilians while we're trying to complete our mission. This gives my team practice in maintaining focus on multiple objectives simultaneously. Another SEAL, younger than the others, spoke up. It would definitely make the exercise more challenging, sir. We'd have to modify our movement patterns and communication. Exactly, Rodriguez confirmed. Challenge breeds competence. Sarah looked at the wall she had been working on, then at the assembled SEALs, then back at Rodriguez. She was aware that this was a moment that could define how she saw herself and her capabilities. Her entire career had been built on solving problems and adapting to unexpected situations. All right, she said finally, but I have conditions. Rodriguez nodded, respecting her need to negotiate terms. I'm listening. First, if at any point I feel unsafe or unable to do my job properly, I stop and leave. No questions, no pressure to continue. Agreed. Second, my work takes priority. If the concrete starts setting incorrectly because of delays or interruptions, the exercise stops until I can fix it. Understood. Third, you explain to me exactly what's happening as we go. I don't want to be surprised by anything. Rodriguez smiled, impressed by her thoroughness. Fair enough. Sergeant Martinez, please brief Ms. He paused, realizing he didn't know her full name. Chen, she supplied. Please brief Ms. Chen on basic safety protocols while I explain the exercise. Parameters to the team. As Martinez approached with a mixture of resignation and professionalism, Sarah felt a strange combination of excitement and nervousness. She had always been the type of person who rose to meet challenges, but this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. Ma'am, Martinez began, his voice taking on the tone of an instructor. I'm going to show you 3 basic hand signals that could be critical if we encounter any problems. Sarah set down her tools and gave him her full attention, knowing that the next few minutes of instruction might be more important than any safety training she had ever received. In the background, she could hear Rodriguez briefing his team on the modified exercise parameters, his voice carrying the confidence of a leader who was used to adapting plans on the fly. What Sarah didn't realize was that this impromptu training session was about to become one of the most intense and eye-opening experiences of her life, testing not just her professional skills but her courage, judgment, and ability to perform under pressure in ways she had never imagined. As the afternoon progressed, Sarah found herself settling into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. The constant awareness of potential threats had heightened her senses rather than overwhelming them. She could track the SEAL's movements through her peripheral vision while maintaining focus on her concrete work, and she had begun to anticipate the radio chatter that preceded each new scenario. Rodriguez had been observing her adaptation with growing interest. Every contractor he had worked with before had either been nervous and distracted by military exercises or had tried to show off their supposed toughness. Sarah was different. She simply absorbed the environment and adapted to it without drama or pretense. "Ms. Chen," Rodriguez called out during a brief lull in the exercise. "I want to try something different for the next scenario." Sarah looked up from smoothing a section of concrete, wiping her hands on her work cloth. "What did you have in mind?" "Up until now, you've been working while we provide security around you. But in real situations, sometimes the protected person has to take a more active role in their own defense." Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness. "I'm not sure what you mean by active role." Rodriguez walked over to where his rifle was positioned against a nearby equipment case. It was a standard military M4 carbine, well-maintained and ready for action. "How much do you know about firearms?" "Basic familiarity," Sarah replied honestly. "I grew up in rural Montana. My father taught me to shoot when I was 12. Hunting rifles mostly, some handgun training. But I haven't touched a gun in probably 5 years. The fundamentals don't change," Rodriguez said, picking up his rifle, "and muscle memory tends to stick around longer than people think." Martinez approached them, his expression showing the same concern he had displayed earlier. "Sir, what exactly are you planning?" "I want to see how Ms. Chen handles herself with a weapon," Rodriguez replied. "Not in combat, just basic proficiency. In real-world scenarios, civilians sometimes have to defend themselves when military protection isn't sufficient." Sarah stared at the rifle, feeling a complex mix of emotions. The practical part of her mind understood the logic of Rodriguez's suggestion, but another part of her was acutely aware that she was far outside her normal comfort zone. "I'm not military," she said quietly. "I'm just here to fix a wall." "Exactly," Rodriguez replied. "And that's what makes this valuable training for all of us. My team needs to know how to quickly assess and utilize civilian capabilities when necessary. You need to know that you can defend yourself if the situation requires it." Thompson had joined the group, along with the rest of the SEAL team. Sarah could see varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity in their faces. She was clearly an unknown quantity to them, and they were wondering how she would handle increased responsibility. "What would this involve?" Sarah asked, her practical nature taking over once again. "Basic rifle familiarization," Rodriguez explained. "Safety procedures, loading, aiming, firing. Then a simple scenario where you might need to provide covering fire while we reposition." "Covering fire?" Sarah's voice rose slightly. "I thought you said this wasn't about putting me in combat situations." "It's not," Rodriguez assured her. "But it is about expanding your understanding of what you're capable of. Sometimes knowing you can handle a weapon is just as important as actually using it." Sarah looked at the rifle again, then at the faces of the SEALs surrounding her. She could see that this had become about more than just training exercises. Rodriguez was testing something both in her and in his team's ability to work with unconventional assets. "If I say yes to this," Sarah said slowly, "what are the safety protocols?" Martinez stepped forward, his instructor persona taking over despite his reservations. "Complete oversight by qualified personnel at all times. You never touch the weapon without direct supervision. All ammunition is accounted for before and after the exercise. And if I'm not comfortable at any point, exercise stops immediately," Rodriguez confirmed. "No questions, no pressure to continue." Sarah took a deep breath, thinking about her father's voice teaching her gun safety all those years ago in the Montana wilderness. She thought about the confidence she had felt throughout the day as she adapted to the military environment. Most importantly, she thought about the respect she had earned from these elite soldiers simply by doing her job well under unusual circumstances. "All right," she said finally, "but we start slow and I want to understand every step before we proceed." Rodriguez smiled, and Sarah could see approval in the faces of the other SEALs. "Outstanding. Martinez, please conduct basic rifle familiarization while I set up the next scenario parameters." As Martinez began explaining the M4's safety features and basic operation, Sarah felt her father's training coming back to her. The weight of the unloaded rifle felt familiar in her hands, and the basic principles of sight alignment and trigger control were exactly as she remembered them. "Good stance," Martinez observed as Sarah shouldered the weapon. "Your father taught you well." Sarah found herself smiling. "He was a Vietnam veteran. He said that if I was going to live in a place where the nearest police officer was 40 minutes away, I better know how to take care of myself." "Smart man," Thompson commented. "Rural skills translate well to military applications." As Sarah went through the basic handling procedures, she became aware that her earlier nervousness was fading. The rifle felt like a tool, not a weapon, and tools were something she understood completely. Every tool had a purpose, proper usage techniques, and safety requirements. This was just another tool, albeit one with more serious consequences for misuse. Load and lock, Martinez instructed, handing her a magazine with a single round. Sarah inserted the magazine with confidence, chambered the round, and engaged the safety exactly as Martinez had demonstrated. The SEALs watched her movements with professional assessment, and she could sense their growing respect for her competence. "Ready for live fire?" Rodriguez asked. Sarah looked downrange at the target, a simple paper silhouette positioned 50 meters away. She thought about all the targets she had hit during hunting trips with her father, all the hours of practice that had built the muscle memory Martinez had mentioned. "Ready," she replied, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. As she settled into her firing stance, Rodriguez moved to a position where he could observe both her technique and the target area. The other SEALs maintained their positions around the range, but their attention was focused on Sarah's performance. "Fire when ready," Martinez instructed. Sarah took a deep breath, let half of it out, and squeezed the trigger with smooth, steady pressure. The rifle fired with a sharp crack, and she immediately applied the safety and lowered the weapon as she had been taught. "Hit," Thompson called out, looking through binoculars at the target. "Center mass, slightly right of center." Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction, but it was Rodriguez's reaction that surprised her most. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, as if he was seeing something in her performance that went beyond simple marksmanship. "Ms. Chen," he said quietly, "I think it's time we had a different kind of conversation about what the rest of this exercise is going to involve." Sarah handed the rifle back to Martinez, her hands steady and her mind alert. She had no idea that Rodriguez was about to propose something that would test not just her shooting skills, but her courage, judgment, and ability to make life-and-death decisions under extreme pressure. Rodriguez studied Sarah with the intensity of a commander evaluating potential under fire. The single shot she had fired wasn't just about marksmanship. It was about how she handled pressure, followed instructions, and maintained composure with a lethal weapon in her hands. What he had seen impressed him more than he had expected. "Ms. Chen," Rodriguez began, his tone taking on a more serious quality. "I'm going to propose something that goes beyond what we discussed earlier. But first I need to ask you a question." Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly, sensing that whatever Rodriguez was about to suggest would be significantly more challenging than anything they had done so far. "Go ahead." "In your construction work, have you ever been in a situation where someone's life depended on your ability to make quick decisions under pressure?" Sarah thought for a moment, then nodded. 2 years ago, I was working on a bridge repair when one of the support cables snapped. A worker was trapped on a section that was about to collapse. I had to decide whether to try to reach him or to secure the remaining structure first. If I made the wrong choice, either he would fall or the whole section would come down on top of both of us. What did you do? I secured the structure first, then went after him. It felt wrong to leave him hanging there, but I knew that if the whole thing collapsed, we'd both be dead instead of just injured. Rodriguez exchanged glances with Martinez, who nodded slightly. "And the outcome?" "We both walked away. He had some minor injuries from the initial cable snap, but nothing serious. The whole section would have collapsed within minutes if I hadn't stabilized it first. So you understand the principle of calculated risk," Rodriguez observed. "You can make hard decisions when lives are on the line." Sarah began to see where this conversation was heading, and it made her nervous. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Rodriguez gestured toward the far end of the shooting range, where Sarah could see several structures that looked like mock buildings. "We have one more scenario to run today. It's more complex than what we've done so far, and it requires someone who can think independently while following orders." Thompson stepped forward with a tablet showing what appeared to be a tactical map. "The scenario involves a hostage rescue situation. Our team has to clear multiple buildings while ensuring the safety of civilians." Sarah looked at the map, trying to understand how she would fit into such an operation. "I'm still not military personnel. I can't be part of a hostage rescue." "Not as a combatant," Rodriguez clarified. "But sometimes in these situations, we need someone who can communicate with civilians. Someone who doesn't look like a threat to frightened people." Martinez, who had been quiet during most of the conversation, spoke up. "Sir, with respect, this is moving pretty far outside normal training parameters." "I know," Rodriguez replied. "But think about the real-world applications. How many times have we been in situations where we needed to work with local civilians? How many times has mission success depended on our ability to quickly integrate non-military personnel into our operations? Sarah was beginning to understand the scope of what Rodriguez was proposing. You want me to act as some kind of civilian liaison during your training exercise? More than that, Rodriguez said. I want you to be armed backup for a specific phase of the operation. The words hung in the air between them, and Sarah felt the weight of what he was suggesting. This wasn't just about observing or providing civilian perspective anymore. This was about taking active responsibility for mission success and potentially for other people's lives. Explain the scenario to me, Sarah said quietly. Rodriguez activated the tablet and showed her a detailed layout of the mock buildings. We have multiple hostages in 2 different structures. The main assault team goes after the primary target, but there's a secondary building with a single hostage and 1 guard. Sarah studied the map, her practical mind automatically analyzing the problem. And you want me to handle the secondary building? With backup, Rodriguez clarified. Thompson would be your partner, but you would take the lead on civilian interaction and potentially on neutralizing the guard if necessary. Thompson looked surprised by this assignment. Sir, I've never worked with a civilian in an active role like this. Exactly, Rodriguez replied. That's what makes it valuable training. You need to learn how to quickly assess and utilize civilian capabilities. Ms. Chen needs to understand what she's capable of under extreme stress. Sarah looked around at the faces of the SEALs, seeing varying degrees of skepticism, curiosity, and concern. She realized that this exercise would be as much about testing them as it would be about testing her. What are the rules of engagement? She asked, surprising herself by using military terminology. Simulated ammunition only, Rodriguez assured her, but the scenario runs as if it were real. You'll have full tactical gear, communication equipment, and responsibility for mission success. Sarah thought about the bridge incident from 2 years earlier, about the split-second decision that had saved 2 lives. She thought about the confidence she had felt throughout the day as she adapted to increasingly challenging situations. What happens if I freeze up? She asked. What happens if I make the wrong decision? Then you learn from it, Rodriguez replied simply. That's what training is for. Better to discover your limitations in a controlled environment than in a real crisis. Sarah looked at the rifle that Martinez was still holding, then back at the tactical map on the tablet. Every instinct she had developed over years of construction work told her that this was beyond her capabilities. But another part of her, a part that had been awakened by the day's experiences, was curious about what she might be capable of. Walk me through the entire scenario, she said. Every detail. Rodriguez's expression showed approval at her methodical approach. Intelligence indicates 2 hostages in the main building, 3 guards. Secondary building has 1 hostage, 1 guard. Primary assault team takes the main target. You and Thompson handle the secondary. Thompson pulled up additional screens on the tablet. The secondary building is a simple 2-room structure. Guard is likely positioned in the front room, hostage in the back. Your job is to neutralize the guard and secure the hostage with minimal noise to avoid alerting the main building. Neutralize how? Sarah asked, her practical mind focusing on specifics. Simulated tranquilizer dart, Martinez explained, producing a modified rifle that looked different from the standard M4. Single shot, effective range about 30 feet. No lethal force required. Sarah examined the dart rifle, noting its lighter weight and simpler operation. This I can handle. The key is timing, Rodriguez continued. You and Thompson approached the building during a coordinated distraction created by the main assault team. You have about a 90-second window to complete your mission before the guards in the main building realize something is wrong. Sarah felt her heart rate increasing, but it was the same focused alertness she experienced when working on complex construction problems. What's my specific role versus Thompson's? Thompson handles tactical movement and communication, Rodriguez explained. You handle civilian interaction and take the shot if necessary. The hostage will be frightened and potentially uncooperative. They need to see someone who doesn't look like a threat. And if the guard sees us coming, then you adapt, Rodriguez said. That's where your construction experience actually becomes valuable. You're used to solving problems on the fly when plans don't work out. Sarah nodded, understanding the parallel. Every construction project involved unexpected complications that required quick thinking and adaptation. Martinez stepped forward with tactical gear. If you're doing this, you need proper equipment. Sarah looked at the body armor, communication headset, and other gear that Martinez was offering. Putting on that equipment would represent a commitment to something far beyond her normal experience. One more question, Sarah said. Why me? You could run this exercise with one of your own people playing the civilian role. Rodriguez paused, considering his answer carefully. Because real civilians don't think like military personnel. They don't move like us, they don't react like us, and they don't make decisions like us. If we're going to be effective working with civilian assets in real-world situations, we need to train with actual civilians. Plus, Thompson added with a slight grin, you've already proven you can handle pressure and follow instructions. Not all civilians can do that. Sarah looked around at the mock buildings in the distance, then at the tactical gear, then at the faces of the SEALs who were waiting for her decision. She thought about spending the rest of her life wondering what she might have been capable of if she had just been brave enough to find out. All right, she said, reaching for the body armor. But if this goes wrong, I'm blaming all of you. Rodriguez smiled as he watched her begin putting on the tactical gear. Fair enough. But I have a feeling you're going to surprise yourself today. As Sarah adjusted the unfamiliar weight of the body armor and tested the communication headset, she had no idea that she was about to face a situation that would require every ounce of courage, quick thinking, and determination she possessed. The next hour would push her far beyond anything she had ever imagined herself capable of. Martinez stood before Sarah with the bearing of a seasoned instructor, his expression serious but patient. Ma'am, I need you to understand that what I'm about to teach you isn't just for today's exercise. These signals could save your life in any emergency situation. Sarah nodded, giving him her complete attention. She had always been a quick learner, and she sensed that Martinez, despite his earlier reservations about the exercise, was committed to ensuring her safety. First signal, Martinez said, raising his fist in the air. Closed fist means stop everything immediately. Don't move, don't speak, just freeze exactly where you are. This could mean incoming danger or a need for absolute silence. Sarah mimicked the gesture, feeling slightly self-conscious but understanding the importance. Got it. Second signal, Martinez continued, pointing toward the ground with his index finger and making small circular motions. This means take cover immediately. Drop what you're doing and get behind the nearest solid barrier. In your case, that would be the concrete wall you're working on or the equipment shed behind you. Sarah practiced the signal and identified her cover options. The wall she was repairing was solid enough to provide protection, and the equipment shed was only about 20 feet away. Third signal, Martinez said, extending his arm and making a beckoning motion. This means come to me immediately but stay low. Don't run upright. Move quickly but keep your profile small. As Sarah practiced the final signal, Rodriguez finished briefing his team and approached them. How's our crash course going, Sergeant? She's a quick study, sir, Martinez replied, and Sarah caught a note of genuine approval in his voice. Understands the importance of following directions without hesitation? Rodriguez looked at Sarah appraisingly. That's good, because hesitation can be deadly in our line of work. Even a fraction of a second can make the difference between mission success and catastrophe. Sarah felt the weight of his words. I understand. In construction, we have the same principle. When someone yells, clear the area, you don't ask questions first. Exactly, Rodriguez confirmed. Now let me explain what we're going to do today. He gestured toward the shooting range, which stretched out before them for several hundred yards. We're running a scenario where our team has been tasked with securing a forward operating base while critical infrastructure repairs are being completed. You represent the civilian contractor who needs protection while completing essential work. Sarah looked at the range with new eyes, trying to imagine it as a combat zone rather than a training facility. What kind of threats will you be simulating? Sniper fire from elevated positions, small unit infiltration attempts, and potential improvised explosive device threats, Rodriguez explained matter-of-factly. All simulated, of course, but realistic enough to keep my team sharp. One of the younger SEALs, whose name tag read Thompson, approached the group. Sir, we've set up the scenario parameters. Targets are positioned at various distances and angles to simulate realistic threat vectors. Rodriguez nodded. Outstanding. Ms. Chen, are you ready to begin? Sarah took a deep breath, looking at her tools and then at the partially repaired wall. I need about 4 more hours to complete this properly. The concrete needs to cure between applications, so there will be waiting periods where I'm not actively working. Perfect, Rodriguez replied. Those waiting periods will give us opportunities to run more intensive scenarios without interfering with your work. As Sarah returned to her repair work, she became acutely aware of the SEALs positioning themselves around the range. They moved with practiced efficiency, establishing overlapping fields of fire and communication points. What had seemed like an empty training facility now felt like a carefully orchestrated defensive position. Rodriguez took up a position about 30 feet from Sarah's work area, his rifle ready but pointed safely downrange. The other team members spread out in a defensive perimeter, their movements so smooth and coordinated that they seemed to flow like water, finding its natural course. Beginning Scenario Alpha, Rodriguez announced into his radio. Civilian contractor on site conducting critical infrastructure repair. Time is 13:47 hours. Sarah continued mixing concrete, but she found herself listening to the radio chatter and observing the SEALs' movements. Their professional calm was both reassuring and impressive. These men had clearly been in real combat situations, and their training reflected that experience. Contact 2 o'clock, 300 meters, Thompson called out suddenly. Sarah's head snapped up involuntarily, even though she knew it was just an exercise. Rodriguez caught her eye and gave her a subtle nod, reminding her to continue working while staying alert. The sound of gunfire erupted across the range as the SEALs engaged their simulated targets. Sarah had heard gunfire before during her work at various military facilities, but experiencing it while being part of the scenario felt completely different. The controlled chaos of their response was mesmerizing. Tango down, someone reported over the radio. Continuing sweep, another voice added. Sarah found herself working more efficiently than usual, her movements sharp and focused. The heightened state of alertness seemed to enhance her concentration rather than distract from it. She applied the concrete patch with precision, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. RPG! Martinez suddenly shouted. Without thinking, Sarah immediately dropped her tools and took cover behind the wall, remembering Martinez's instructions about instant response to danger calls. Even though she knew it was just training, her body had reacted automatically to the urgency in his voice. Outstanding reaction time, Rodriguez called out to her once the simulated threat had been neutralized. That's exactly what we need to see. Sarah felt a surge of pride at his approval. She had always been competent at her job, but this was different. This was about life and death decision-making, even in a simulated environment. As she returned to her work, Rodriguez moved closer to her position. How are you feeling about this so far? Honestly, Sarah paused in her mixing. It's intense, but I'm surprised by how focused I feel. Usually, distractions make my work suffer, but this is having the opposite effect. Rodriguez smiled. That's what we call combat focus. When the stakes are high, some people freeze up, but others find a level of clarity they never knew they had. Is that what real combat is like? Sarah asked, then immediately worried she had overstepped some boundary. Sometimes, Rodriguez replied thoughtfully. Combat is unpredictable. Sometimes it's absolute chaos, sometimes it's eerily calm. The key is being able to adapt to whatever the situation demands. Sarah nodded, understanding the parallel to her own work. Construction sites could be unpredictable too, requiring constant adaptation and problem-solving under pressure. Sniper fire. 11 o'clock. Thompson's voice cut through their conversation. This time Sarah didn't even pause in her work. She simply shifted her position to place the wall between herself and the reported threat direction, continuing to apply concrete while staying protected. The movement felt natural, as if she had been doing this kind of work for years. Rodriguez watched her smooth adaptation with growing respect. You're a natural at this, he observed. Sarah felt a warm glow of accomplishment, but she kept her focus on the task at hand. The concrete was setting properly, and she was making good progress despite the unconventional working conditions. What she didn't realize was that Rodriguez was already thinking beyond the current exercise. He was beginning to see potential in Sarah that even she didn't recognize, and he was starting to formulate an idea that would challenge both of them in ways neither had anticipated. And the decisions she made would earn her a level of respect that few civilians ever received from elite military personnel. Sarah adjusted the tactical vest for the third time, trying to find a position where the unfamiliar weight felt manageable. The body armor was heavier than she had expected, and the various pouches and equipment attachments made her feel bulky and awkward. Thompson watched her struggles with patient amusement. "First time wearing tactical gear?" he asked. "First time wearing anything more complicated than a tool belt," Sarah replied, finally finding a comfortable position for the shoulder straps. "How do you move normally in this stuff?" "You adapt," Thompson said simply. "After a while it becomes like a second skin. The key is not fighting against it, but working with it." Rodriguez approached them with a handheld radio and a detailed briefing packet. "Final mission brief," he announced. "Thompson, you and Ms. Chen will approach the secondary building from the east side during the initial distraction phase. Primary assault begins in 10 minutes. Sarah looked toward the mock buildings, which suddenly seemed much more imposing now that she was about to approach them as part of an actual tactical operation. The secondary building was a simple concrete structure about the size of a small house, with windows positioned to provide good visibility of the surrounding area. "What do we know about the hostage?" Sarah asked, studying the briefing materials. "Simulated civilian contractor, similar background to yourself," Rodriguez replied. "Likely to be frightened, possibly injured, definitely confused about what's happening." Thompson checked his equipment methodically. "The actor playing the hostage has been instructed to react as realistically as possible. Don't expect cooperation just because you're there to help." Sarah nodded, thinking about how she might react if she were suddenly caught up in a hostage situation. Fear would probably be her dominant emotion, followed by confusion and distrust of anyone carrying weapons. "Communication protocol," Rodriguez continued. "You'll be on Channel 2 with Thompson. I'll be monitoring from the command post. Call signs are Alpha for Thompson, Bravo for you, Ms. Chen." "Bravo," Sarah repeated, testing how the military designation felt. "Copy that." Martinez approached with the dart rifle, which had been loaded and safety checked. "Remember, this is a single-shot weapon. You don't get a second chance if you miss." Sarah took the rifle, noting its balance and weight. It was significantly lighter than the M4 she had fired earlier, but the responsibility felt much heavier. "Effective range is 30 feet maximum," Martinez continued. "Optimal range is 15 to 20 feet. The dart needs to hit center mass to be effective. What happens if I hit an arm or leg?" "Delayed effect, partial incapacitation," Thompson answered. "Enough to slow down the target, but not enough to guarantee mission success." Sarah sighted down the rifle, practicing the smooth movement from ready position to firing stance that Martinez had shown her. The motions felt awkward with the tactical gear, but she could sense the muscle memory from her earlier training beginning to adapt. "Primary assault team, report status," Rodriguez spoke into his radio. "Alpha team in position," came the response. "Bravo team in position," another voice confirmed. Rodriguez looked at Sarah and Thompson. "Secondary team, report status." Thompson keyed his radio. "Alpha ready. Bravo ready." Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline at hearing herself included in the tactical communication. This was really happening. In less than 5 minutes, she would be moving toward a building with the intention of neutralizing an armed guard and rescuing a hostage. "Movement begins in 60 seconds, Rodriguez announced. "Secondary team, you are cleared to begin approach on my signal." Sarah and Thompson moved to their starting position at the edge of the training area. From here, the secondary building looked deceptively peaceful. Just another concrete structure in a military training facility. But Sarah knew that inside, actors were playing out roles that represented life-and-death situations that SEALs faced in real combat zones around the world. "You doing okay?" Thompson asked quietly, noticing Sarah's focused concentration. "Surprisingly, yes," Sarah replied. "I keep thinking this should be more terrifying than it is." "That's because you're thinking like an operator now instead of like a civilian," Thompson observed. "You're focused on the mission instead of on the danger." Sarah considered his words, realizing that he was right. Instead of thinking about all the ways things could go wrong, she was thinking about sight lines, approach routes, and tactical considerations. 30 seconds to movement," Rodriguez announced over the radio. Thompson checked his weapon one final time and looked at Sarah. "Remember, I handle movement and security. You handle the civilian contact and the shot if necessary. Trust your training and trust your instincts." "Copy that," Sarah replied, surprised by how natural the military response felt. 10 seconds. Rodriguez's voice crackled through their earpieces. Sarah felt her breathing slow and her focus narrow. The world seemed to become very clear and simple. There was a mission to complete, specific tasks to accomplish, and people depending on her performance. Execute, 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 Rodriguez commanded. Thompson immediately began moving toward the building in a low crouch, his rifle ready and his movements fluid despite the tactical gear. Sarah followed, trying to match his pace and posture while keeping the dart rifle in a ready position. The distance to the building was about 200 meters across open ground, but Thompson led them along a route that used available cover effectively. Sarah found herself automatically scanning for threats and maintaining situational awareness in ways she had never done before. Mari. Assault beginning distraction, came a voice over the radio. Immediately, the sound of simulated gunfire and tactical commands erupted from the main building. Sarah could see muzzle flashes and movement around the larger structure as the primary assault team began their coordinated attack. Secondary team, you are go for approach, Rodriguez confirmed. Thompson increased their pace, and Sarah found herself keeping up easily despite the unfamiliar gear. Her breathing was controlled, her movements were deliberate, and her mind was completely focused on the task ahead. As they reached the final approach to the secondary building, Thompson held up his fist in the stop signal that Martinez had taught her hours earlier. Sarah immediately froze, scanning the building for any signs of movement or awareness from the guard inside. Building appears quiet, Thompson whispered into his radio. No indication the target is aware of our approach. Copy that, Rodriguez responded. You are clear to proceed with building entry. Thompson looked at Sarah, his expression serious but confident. This is it. You ready? Sarah checked the dart rifle one more time, ensuring the safety was off and the weapon was ready to fire. She thought about all the construction projects where she had been the person others counted on to get critical work done. Right the first time, ready, she said quietly as they approached the building's entry point. Sarah had no idea that the next few minutes would test every lesson she had learned about courage, quick thinking, and performance under pressure. The scenario they were about to encounter would push her further than anything she had ever experienced, and her responses would earn her a place in the memories and respect of some of the most elite soldiers in the world. Thompson positioned himself beside the building's entrance, his back against the concrete wall as he prepared to breach the door. Sarah took her assigned position on the opposite side, the dart rifle ready in her hands. Through the small window, she could see movement inside, shadows shifting in what appeared to be the front room where intelligence had indicated the guard would be positioned. Visual confirmation of target in front room. Sarah whispered into her radio, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Copy that. Bravo, Rodriguez responded from the command post. You are cleared to proceed with entry. Thompson looked at Sarah and nodded toward the door handle. According to their briefing, the door would be unlocked, representing a tactical advantage they needed to exploit quickly and quietly. Sarah watched Thompson's hand signals, counting down from 3. On his signal, she would enter first, with Thompson providing immediate backup. The plan was for her to neutralize the guard with the dart rifle while Thompson secured the room and located the hostage. 3. Sarah's breathing slowed to match her heartbeat. 2. Her grip on the dart rifle tightened, muscle memory guiding her hands to the optimal firing. Position 1. The world seemed to slow down as her focus narrowed to the immediate task. Thompson threw open the door and Sarah immediately moved through the entrance, the dart rifle raised and ready. The scene inside was exactly as briefed. A single guard actor positioned near a table, his simulated weapon within easy reach but not immediately ready. The guard turned toward the door, his eyes widening in surprise at seeing a woman in tactical gear, instead of the military personnel he might have expected. That moment of confusion was exactly what Sarah needed. Don't move, she commanded, her voice carrying an authority she didn't know she possessed. The guard hesitated, clearly trying to decide whether to go for his weapon or surrender. In that split second of uncertainty, Sarah made a decision that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Instead of immediately firing the dart rifle, she stepped closer, reducing the distance to optimal range while keeping the weapon trained on the guard's center mass. Put your hands on your head and step away from the table. The guard's training as an actor was to resist capture unless overwhelmed by superior force. He made a sudden move toward his weapon, and Sarah's response was immediate and decisive. The dart rifle fired with a quiet popping sound, and the projectile struck the guard squarely in the chest. He staggered backward, his hand falling away from his weapon as the simulated tranquilizer took effect. "Target neutralized," Thompson announced into his radio. "Room secure." Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline and accomplishment, but she forced herself to focus on the next phase of the mission. "Hostage location?" Thompson was already moving toward the back room, his weapon ready in case of additional threats. "Rear room, as briefed." Sarah followed him, maintaining her ready position with the dart rifle even though the primary threat had been eliminated. As they approached the back room, they could hear sounds of distress, crying and what sounded like someone trying to work free from restraints. "Federal agents," Thompson called out as they entered the room, using the cover identity that had been established for the exercise. "We're here to help you." The hostage actor was tied to a chair in the center of the room, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She looked at Sarah's tactical gear and weapon with obvious terror, clearly not understanding that they were there to rescue her. "Please don't hurt me," the hostage pleaded, her voice shaking convincingly. This was the moment Sarah had been specifically trained for. Thompson could handle tactical situations, but civilian interaction required a different approach. Sarah slung the dart rifle across her back and approached the hostage with her hands visible and empty. "My name is Sarah," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "We're here to get you out of here safely. I'm going to cut these ropes and then we're going to walk out of here together." The hostage's eyes darted between Sarah and Thompson, still clearly frightened but beginning to show signs of hope. "Are you police?" "We're the good guys," Sarah replied, pulling out a knife to cut the restraints. "The important thing is getting you somewhere safe." As Sarah worked to free the hostage, Thompson maintained security, watching both the entrance and monitoring radio communications from the primary assault team. The coordinated attack on the main building was proceeding according to plan, but their window for extraction was limited. "Restraints removed," Sarah announced as the last rope fell away. "Can you walk?" The hostage nodded, though her legs were clearly unsteady from being tied up for an extended period. Sarah immediately moved to support her, while Thompson prepared to lead them out of the building. "Secondary team, report status?" Rodriguez's voice came through their earpieces. "Target neutralized. Hostage secured and mobile," Thompson responded. "Ready for extraction." "Copy that." "Primary assault complete, all targets neutralized. Area is secure for extraction." As they prepared to leave the building, Sarah felt the hostage's weight against her arm and realized how real this scenario had felt despite being an exercise. The woman's fear had been genuine, her relief at being rescued was authentic, and the responsibility Sarah had felt for her safety was as real as any she had experienced in her construction work. "You did good," Thompson said quietly as they moved toward the exit. "Really good." Sarah looked back at the unconscious guard, then at the frightened woman she was helping to walk. "It felt real." "That's the point," Thompson replied. "If it doesn't feel real in training, you can't trust your responses when it is real." As they emerged from the building, Sarah could see Rodriguez and the rest of the SEAL team waiting for them. The expression on Rodriguez's face was one of unmistakable respect and approval. "Outstanding work," Rodriguez announced as they approached. "Both of you executed that mission flawlessly." The hostage actor immediately relaxed, stepping out of character now that the exercise was complete. "That was incredible," she said to Sarah. "I've worked with military units before, but you made me feel actually safe, not just rescued." Sarah felt a warmth of accomplishment that was different from anything she had experienced in her construction career. This wasn't just about completing a task correctly, it was about rising to meet a challenge that had tested every aspect of her, character and capability. Rodriguez approached her as Thompson began the post-mission equipment check. "Ms. Chen, I want you to know that what you accomplished today goes far beyond what most people are capable of. You adapted to an unfamiliar environment, learned new skills under pressure, and performed with the competence of someone with years of training." Sarah looked around at the SEALs who had spent the day testing and training with her. Each of them was nodding approval, and she could see genuine respect in their expressions. "I couldn't have done any of this without excellent training and support," Sarah replied. "You all made it possible for me to succeed." "We provided the framework," Rodriguez corrected, "but the courage, quick thinking, and determination came from you." As Sarah began removing the tactical gear, She reflected on the day's extraordinary journey from simple wall repair to tactical operations. She had discovered capabilities in herself that she never knew existed, and she had earned the respect of some of the most elite warriors in the world. Most importantly, she had learned that with proper training, clear thinking, and determination, ordinary people could rise to meet extraordinary challenges. The concrete wall she had come to repair seemed almost trivial now, compared to the barriers she had broken through in her own mind about what she was capable of achieving. Rodriguez approached her one final time as she prepared to return to her regular work. "Miss Chen, if you ever decide you want a career change, I know some people who would be very interested in talking to you," Sarah smiled, looking at the dart rifle she was handing back to Martinez, then at the wall she still needed to finish repairing. "I think I'll stick with construction for now. But thank you for showing me what I'm really capable of." As the SEALs began packing up their equipment and preparing to leave, Sarah returned to her concrete work with a new sense of confidence and capability. The wall repair that had seemed routine that morning now felt like just another problem to solve, another challenge to meet with skill and determination. She had started the day as a contractor fixing a wall. She was ending it as someone who knew she could handle whatever challenges life might present, armed with the knowledge that courage and competence could be developed, and that ordinary people were capable of extraordinary things when the situation demanded it.